So good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I'm Megan Melnyk, one of the third-year urology residents.
I'm Nathan Hoag, a better third-year urology resident.
And we're going to be talking to you guys today about urology selection, about what makes a good resident, and how we select people to be in our program and into our specialty. And it's not working. So the objectives of today's talk are to discuss the CARMS, the Canadian Resident Matching Service, and the algorithm that the applicants go through in order to match to our specialty, to assess the trends in application and matching rates to urology and compare this to other specialties. We want to look at our method of selecting prospective residents and to see if there's ways that we can improve this. And finally, we want to see if there's anything that predicts who will be successful in a surgical residency program. So a little bit about CARMS, or the Canadian Resident Matching Service. This was started in 1994. It's a non-for-profit, computer-based program that matches medical students and university programs. Medical students apply in their final year. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of this process, last year there was 2,528 participants in the CARMS match. There were 17 medical schools across Canada and actually 31 programs that participated. The largest amount of applicants during the program is always family medicine. Last year they had 859 applicants to their program. So each applicant, or each application consists of several things, and this all goes to the central CARMS database. And this includes applicants' transcripts, their dean's letters, reference letters, their personal letters, and CV. So after all the documentation is gathered, the selection committees review this, and then they hold the CARMS interview. So for urology, we're unique in that we have the CARMS fair, or the Urology Fair, and this is a single day of interviews held each winter. Now it's coming up February the 3rd, I believe, and it's always held in Toronto. All English Canadian urology programs participate in this fair. And of note, UBC was the last to join this format, and this was done in 2001. So this is an example of what a candidate who goes through the interview process might see as their schedule. So this is Nathan's schedule, actually. So you can see every candidate has an interview and also info session for where they are interviewing. And of note, every interview is 20 minutes long. And if you're someone who, like Nathan, who gets lots of interviews, it's quite a rigorous day. This is an example of what the selection committee gets before the interview. So for this is UBC, and on the left you can see all the people that they interviewed. This is not where they were ranked. This is just where they're, how they're interviewed, or the timing, what school they're from. And at the top you can see the selection committee, and each person ranks in order of 1 to whatever, 10 or 15 of who they want in the program, and basically the lowest score, whoever gets all ones, is good to go. The Urology Fair was initiated by Dr. Jewett in Toronto, and the fair was ultimately designed to minimize the costs and time away for both the applicants and the faculty. Obviously, there are pros and cons for this model. The cons being that this is a short interview process, so everybody only has 20 minutes. And this doesn't happen that much in urology, but there are some applicants who don't actually do an elective at that particular school. So if you're just going to Toronto, you don't get a chance to visit the city or visit the people in the program. So it's kind of just difficult to determine if you're going to be a good fit for that program. And also, all the interviews are in one day. So if you're having a bad day, this can ruin your entire day of interviews. The pros of this model are that the financial costs incurred for the applicants were shown to be significantly lower than other applicants who have to fly across the country for interviews. However, overall, the costs for the programs were not significantly different for those holding on-site interviews. In general, the applicants have less days absent from medical school compared to the people that do not attend the urology fair. But just of note, right now, all the participants in the fair still get the 2-week blackout period that the other CARMS medical students get. So the CARMS process has been scrutinized and talked about quite a bit, even though the purpose of CARMS is basically to create a level playing field for all applicants and trying to make the application process uniform. And Dr. Fair, who's from the Department of Plastic Surgery here at UBC, wrote a commentary about choosing the right resident. And her debate is that for CARMS, it's basically one chance to residency, or sometimes you put all your eggs in one basket. And she states that how can somebody decide what they want to do for the rest of their life, basically after 2 years of undergrad medicine, where those 2 years are usually spent doing non-clinical work. She said for competitive specialties, you need to decide early. Often you haven't seen the other specialties there are. It's a huge commitment for residents, both financially, where you fly around for electives and interviews, and it often becomes auditions for getting in reference letters from your preceptors. And overall, she finds that people are spending less time in their 4th year learning to become good doctors and more time trying to get in the program of choice. And if you don't back up and you're going for competitive specialty and you go unmatched, then basically you're out of the first iteration of CARMS and you go into the second and you get whatever spots are left over, and that's what you match for. So her question was, should we revisit the rotating internship, which used to be the old model? Well, the problem with this is that the licensing has changed and we no longer get a general practitioner license after 1 year of rotating internship. You need to do 2 years for family medicine. The internship is only 1 year duration, and after 6 months you need to select what you want to do for your specialty. So are we really that more mature, and can we really solidify what we want to do after additional 6 months? And finally, we're not unique in our profession that we force people to decide what they want to do early. There's a lot of other professions, such as engineering, where you have to decide early on what route you want to go, if you want to be civil or mechanical or electrical. So I don't think it's unfair to ask people to decide early on what they want to do for their career. So Dr. Teichman, when he was in the United States, looked at urology residents matching to the American Urological Association match in 1999. So he sent out a questionnaire to residents and program directors after the 99 match, and they wanted to look at the behaviors and attitudes towards this match. They wanted to ask program directors and applicants how they felt about it, if they felt that it was a fair process. And so here's some of the questions they asked. It's kind of hard to see, but the first one was, they asked applicants, did you feel you were being lied to by the programs? And applicants felt that they were always or frequently lied to by the programs in regard to what they were told, if they were ranked number 1 or if they really wanted them into the program. On the flip side, when asked the programs, they felt lied to by the applicants. Majority said sometimes they felt that they're being lied to. When the applicants were asked about being dishonest and what characterized their thoughts about this, majority felt that they felt badly. However, they were just playing the game in order to get into the program that they wanted to be in. And on the flip side, when asking the programs about being dishonest and what characterized their thoughts, majority did not feel badly for being dishonest to the applicants. So in the CARMS interview process and also in the American interview process, you're not allowed to ask any personal questions. So that includes your ethnic background, your native language, if you want children, if you have children, if you're married. You're not allowed to ask if you've been convicted of a crime. So here, when it shows that females were consistently asked more personal questions such as, are you married, do you currently have children, and do you intend on having children? So they included that inappropriate questions are pervasive in the American Urology match process. The majority of applicants on either side are feeling lied to, and there appears to be a lack of remorse, and both sides feel it's just playing the game in order to get the best applicants or for the applicant to match to the program of their choice. So Dr. McNeely and I looked at the CARMS data that's available publicly over the last several years to kind of get an idea of where urology fits in all this and what's been going on with matching rates and application rates to the different specialties. So in this slide, you can see the absolute number of students ranking surgery first compared to the total applicants to CARMS. So the blue line shows total applicants since 1997. You can see that it's gone from 1,117 to 2,528, which is a 128% increase in participants within CARMS. For surgery, you can see that it's just more than doubled. It has been a percent increase in applicants to surgery by 97%. This graph shows the absolute numbers of students ranking urology first. So you can see in 2002 there was 30 applicants, and this has been steadily increasing. However, it's not quite as dramatic of what you see of the increase in people ranking surgery first as a whole. It's increased to 40 in 2011, with 2010 being the most applicants we had to our specialty, where there was 50 applicants. So we know that there's more females graduating from medical school, and there's been an increase in female medical school graduates from 51 to 58% since 2002. We know that the number of applicants to surgery has increased by about 97%. And when you look at females, the percentage of females choosing surgery first, this has increased from 49 to it's increased from 21% to 41%. So it has increased steadily, and reflecting the increase in people applying to surgery. In urology, it seems more dramatic because there's less numbers. So in 2004, there was only about 6 females applying to urology, but there is a steady increase if you don't look at 2011. It's just not quite as dramatic as the percentage of females choosing surgery first. So next we looked at the percentage increase in applicants versus spots available from 2002 to 2011. So the blue bars represent increase in spots in the specialties over this period, and the yellow represents increase in applicants over this period. So for general surgery, you can see they've increased their spots 61%, but they've had an increase in applicants who are picking general surgery first choice by 116%. Similarly, in orthopedics, they've increased their spots by 131, but they've also increased their applicant rate by 120%. In urology, however, our spots have increased by 113% over this time period, and overall, we've only had a 40% increase in people applying to our specialty. And this is also quite dramatic in plastic surgery, where they've increased their spots quite dramatically, but percent of applicants has not increased as much. So now looking at the probability of matching first choice to urology, you can see in 2002, the probability of matching urology was 50% in that year, and in 2011 it was 76%. In 2009, the probability of matching to urology was 88%, and that just happens to be the year that Nathan and Mike and I matched, so we call that the ball in the barrel, or the slim pickings year. And finally, the probability of matching to urology as your first choice if you're male or female, it appears to be general neutral. The pink is the females, and it looks, again, quite dramatic because there's low numbers. But overall, the probability of matching to urology is gender neutral. So in summary, applicants participating in CARMS has expanded. The number of applicants to surgery has increased, and has a number of positions in surgery. The number of positions in urology has doubled. However, the proportion of applicants selecting urology first has decreased. And now, why is this? Is this because we're becoming non-competitive? Well, everybody's met the applicants who've come through our program the last little while for electives, and they're really good, outstanding applicants. So they're competitive between each other. We have a lot of good applicants to select from. However, we're just not getting as many of them. And factors that may account for this are that there's a decreased or poor undergrad exposure to urology. There may be a demand for specialties with controllable lifestyles. We know that there's gender shifts in undergraduate medicine, with more females graduating per year. And because of poor undergrad exposure, there's lack of good role models for incoming applicants. So Nathan and Dr. McNeely looked at undergrad exposure to urology in 2010 at UBC. And they found that 56% of students felt inadequate exposure to urology in their undergraduate training, and only 41% of students actually did a rotation in urology during their clerkship training. The question is, if we are getting less applicants to our specialty, is there a way that we can improve our selection process?
Okay. So now we'll talk a little bit about first, who are urology residents, who are urologists, to get a better sense of the kind of applicants we have been getting in recent years, and to see if there's any factors that we can identify in them. So the first paper that we'll talk about is a paper that was done by Dr. McNeely and Dr. Eng, when Dr. Eng was a resident, which was comparing personality indexes of urology residents to the general adult population. And this was done with the NEO Personality Inventory, which is fairly well described and validated personality inventory. So the personality testing is a self-administered inventory, 240 statements, which break the residents into different groups, showing the personality traits on the left-hand table there: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And then the subgroups of those 5 major personality traits are each broken into 6 further personality traits that are shown in descending order on the right. So what was the urologic personality? Is it unique? Well, urology residents, compared to the general adult population, had higher scores in extroversion, openness, and conscientiousness, and there was no significant differences for neuroticism or agreeableness. So what does that mean, and how does that translate into personalities? Well, we know that for higher scores on extroversion, the second group, they tend to be warm, social, dominant, and group leaders. High levels of openness, the second arrow there, tends to have high levels of intellectual curiosity. And finally, on the far right, high levels of conscientiousness tends to translate into purposeful and determined achievers with a tendency towards workaholism. And for the remaining 2 scores for neuroticism, low scores tend to be more desirable, with those people showing calm, even-tempered personalities, dealing well with stress. And agreeableness, it's actually good to be more average, avoiding dependency or quarrelsome personalities. This is a picture of 3 of our urology residents showing high levels of extroversion, openness. And Chuck is my favorite on the right. So the next thing we were looking at is who are urologists, and there has been some work done on this subject as well. So the first paper that we have is by Dr. McNeely and Dr. Afshar, trying to describe the surgical personality, comparing urologists, non-urologists, and non-surgeons. And their aim was to determine whether there was a urologic personality. So again, they used the NEO Personality Inventory, the revised edition, to compare the personality traits between the 3 groups. And what did they find? Who are urologists? When they compared the 5 major personality traits, urologists did score significantly higher extroversion scores compared to non-urologist surgeons and non-surgeons. The remaining 4 personality traits, there was no significant differences. And when it was broken down specifically into the 6 subgroups, urologists had higher scores specifically for gregariousness, activity, excitement-seeking, and positive emotions, which tends to be a more favorable group of people to work with. And Dr. Matsumoto, who's an expert on personality testing and often makes commentaries, wrote an article last year in the CUAJ describing the urologist, the life of the party. And I think he did talk a little bit about this at his visiting lecture this year as well. So since we know that urologists tend to have higher scores on extroversion on personality testing, should we be trying to select applicants based on extroversion scores, or could personality testing be useful? We know that the candidate's personality is often discussed at the urology fair, trying to find a candidate with the best fit for the program, but oftentimes it's a bit of a subjective process. And we do know that interpersonal skills are often considered as important as other aspects of the application or the applicant, such as intelligence or technical skills. He did conclude that personalities are important in determining the dynamics of a urology residency program. Oftentimes, if certain residents have sour personalities, it can create problems for the whole program. And he often looks for candidates that show positive attitude, upbeat personality, or outgoing nature. So how do we choose the best group of residents, like Dr. McNeely and Dr. Goldenberg have for the last 5 years, and Dr. Gourley is starting to? What tools do we have for selecting resident candidates? Well, we have our written application, which is now computer-based, that's delivered through CARMS. We have the reference letters that many of you have written over the past. Each medical student usually provides 3 to 5 reference letters. The transcripts, which have become a bit less useful in the recent years with moving to pass-fail grades for the majority of medical schools. Research experience is obviously a consideration. The personal letter, where the applicants describe why they wanted to do urology. And the interview, which tends to be fairly important, and then other activities on their CV. So this is a paper that we reviewed that was looking into the selection of general surgery residents. It was a survey study which was sent to all American and Canadian general surgery program directors and department chairs. And their goal was to look at the most important factors in considering acceptance of a prospective applicant to their program. It wasn't unexpected that the interview tended to be the most important factor in the process, as ranked most highly by those on the selection committee. They also used the USMLE Step 1 and 2 as being fairly important, though for Canadian schools we don't use this examination. Letters of recommendation were considered quite important. The AOA is an academic society, Alpha Omega Alpha, and it's reserved for the top 1% of medical students, and we don't have that in Canada either. But Dr. McLaughlin wanted everybody to know that he's a member of it. He couldn't make it today, but
he went to UBC.
Well, maybe they did have it in Canada at a certain point, but
Didn't even buy a membership.
Yeah.
For his year, they.
Yeah. He said he tried to bring it back to UBC, but they didn't. They weren't willing to have it. And then it's a bit surprising to me that research and publications were considered a little further down on the list of considerations, as oftentimes medical students are trying to do a lot of research and publications to strengthen their application. So does this translate into any techniques for improving resident selection? What has been suggested in the past is moving towards more structured behavioral-based interviews. And the current interview is a bit of an informal form of this, but what has been suggested is creating job-specific objectives for a urology resident, outlining essential and desirable knowledge or skills, and developing a list of competencies that would be ideal in an applicant. And then in creating these competencies and objectives, you can use that to ask the applicants in the interview about past situations to see if they display these attributes. And we know that past performances tend to dictate future performances, so it may be a useful tool in that respect. So the ENT surgeons in Ohio looked at this, creating a specific job analysis. They had experts in human resources create a list of objectives, knowledge, skills, and competencies specific to the role. And they had found previously that success in their first year of residency will translate into successful completion of a residency program. So they developed behavioral-based questions for all the applicants, which were administered in parallel to a typical non-structured interview at the time of application. And they were trying to determine whether these behavioral-based interview questions can help improve the resident selection process. So this is a list of the main objective and the job objectives that they laid out in helping trying to select the residents. They would ask questions based on these objectives and try to find who might be the best candidates to display these. For example, number 6, be a team player. You may ask the candidate an example of when they acted as part of a team to see if they understand that role and to see how well they would work as a team member. So their conclusions, and shown on this graph, were that the interview scores on the behavioral-based interview tended to correlate fairly strongly with their overall rank on the list, taking into account all the other factors of the application. So they felt that it was a somewhat useful tool in helping the decision process. Another topic that has been discussed in the literature is about psychology testing and whether industrial psychology can be used to help improve the resident selection process. This is already fairly well established in the business world and the U.S. Air Force for screening out applicants who may have red flags or may have adverse personalities. So the problem with the urology fair is that a 20-minute interview is a fairly short time period, and without more exposure to the applicant, 20 minutes may not be enough to get a good gauge or good sense of their personality. And we know that even someone who's a sociopath or antisocial may actually do quite well in a short interview. So the question is whether or not the psych testing may make this process more objective and whether there may be an application to our specialty. So the industrial psychology, the testing is administered by psychologists who develop specific tests and create a programmed interview to try to measure these traits. So how has it been used in the past? Well, this plastic surgery residency program here at UBC has been using industrial psychology, and what they found is that it has actually changed their rank orders when selecting for the specific traits that they want. Of course, this has only been used in the last few years, so how that translates into success during residency and completion of the residency program and marks on the board exams is still yet to be seen. One of the negative parts about the psychology testing is that the candidates tend to not like them, and it reflects poorly on their impression of the program. And another overriding question is whether it's ethical to use industrial psychology methods on prospective applicants and whether it will be useful in the future. So what factors will predict who will become a good resident? Well, these are some of the factors that seem to have gotten these residents in the past.
All right, so we need to know what defines a successful surgical resident. So like other programs, we have monthly rotation evaluations or end of rotation evaluations where we look at our technical skills, our medical knowledge, and we're assessed on each of the 7 CAN MEDS roles, which we won't go through today. The question is, can residency performance be predicted by any pre-selection criteria that a candidate may have? So this was a paper done by a group in Kentucky looking at general surgery residents, and they wanted to look at the relationship between criteria used at the selection of residents and their performance during residency. So they used the performance during residency based on faculty judgment of their knowledge, skill, and overall ability. And the pre-selection factors they looked at were publications, research participation, their marks on national board exams, if they had honors throughout their medical school, and also if they participated in what hobbies they had, specifically team or solo sports. So this graph plots on the bottom. This is pre-rank on the bottom. So these are the selection factors present before they got into residency. And post-rank is how they're ranked in residency based on the assessment by their staff. And they found there was no relationship between the rank order assigned before residency and the rank order based on performance during residency. So overall, they were unable to predict success using any criteria available about a candidate at admission. It's interesting, though, that 4 of the residents in their top 10 listed team sports as an interest or hobby on their application. And this was not seen in any of the residents in the bottom 10 in their list. This is not significant, it just was interesting that this is not seen in the bottom 10. So if we don't have any criteria that predict who will become a good resident at the time of selection, maybe we should be looking at their surgical ability at the time of entrance into or application into a surgical program. So currently we are not using technical skills or manual dexterity as a tool to select for applicant or surgical residents. This group looked at surgical skill assessment at the time of someone applying to general surgery, and they did a manual dexterity testing at the time of interview, and they did a laparoscopic test on a simulator. And they compared the scores to the surgical applicants to surgical residents in their second or third year, and they also compared this to internal medicine interns. So the question was, do surgical skills influence resident selection? And you can see here, sort of, that the residents in the second and third years, who are the surgical residents, consistently performed better on all 4 of the laparoscopic tasks. And these were camera navigation, instrument navigation, grasping, or lifting and grasping. The internal medicine interns, they had to use PGY-1 because they couldn't get the internal medicine med school applicants to participate, so they used interns. They performed better on 3 out of the 4 laparoscopic tasks, including instrument navigation, grasping, and lifting and grasping. The only task where there was no difference between the surgical applicants and the interns was in camera navigation. So they did conclude that there is no self-selection of applicants to a general surgery residency program based on innate or perceived surgical skills. So if we can't predict who will be a successful resident, is there anything about a resident or about an applicant that predicts that they will have a poor performance during residency or predict attrition?
So this next paper looked at factors related to attrition during a general surgery residency program when looking retrospectively at the data they had at the time of application. And for their project, they defined success in residency as completion of training and passing their American board exams on the first attempt. And they were able to identify several variables associated with unsatisfactory outcomes. So this is a table showing some of the factors that they felt that were found to be related to unsuccessful outcomes during residency, including age over 29 years, female sex, repeated courses, failure to participate in team sports, and finally a lack of positive comments on the dean's letter. So for our conclusions, we found that the ratio of applicants to positions in our specialty is declining. We found that undergraduate exposure to urology is suboptimal, but still important for attracting the best candidates. We need to work on maintaining maximum exposure for medical students. The urology residents and urologists are a unique group of people with favorable personality profiles. That industrial psychology methods may help in the future for decreasing subjectivity of the process. And it is often difficult to predict success in residency, though there were some factors, some negative predictors. That's it. Thank you.